Hi everyone, and welcome back to Bowdie Shorts, making law make sense in 15 minutes or less. Now, so far in this contract law series, we've spent a lot of time looking at how contracts are formed and what they contain. But what happens when a contract is broken? What remedy does the innocent party receive? The answer in most cases is damages. And today's video focuses on one deceptively simple question: how much money should the claimant receive? Because that's really what damages are all about. They're not about punishment or revenge. They're not about teaching the defendant a lesson. Instead, they're about the financial bottom line. So let's see how this works. Now, the first thing to understand is that contract damages are not designed to punish the defendant. The courts are not interested in making examples of people. Instead, the goal is compensation, and the law wants to place the innocent party in the position they would have been if the contract had been properly performed. And that single idea drives almost everything in this topic. So, whenever you see a damages problem, the big question to ask is, where would the claimant have been in the contract had it been performed properly? And then compare that position with where they actually are. The difference between those 2 points is usually the starting point for damages. Let's have a quick look at expectation loss. And this is the most important measure of contractual damages. It's sometimes referred to as expectation loss, or sometimes known as loss of bargain. But the idea is simple. The claimant expected to receive a particular benefit from the contract. Because of the breach, they didn't receive it. So damages are compensating for that lost benefit. It'd probably be helpful to look at an example. So imagine somebody agrees to sell you goods for £1,000. They later refuse to deliver. You have to buy equivalent goods elsewhere for £1,200. What have you actually lost? Well, the answer isn't £1,200, it's £200. Because if the contract had been properly performed, you would have only paid 1,000. The breach has left you £200 worse off. That £200, that is your expectation loss. So the golden rule with this, and a useful way of remembering expectation loss, is that we are looking to give the claimant what they bargained for. That doesn't mean giving them the goods. It means giving them the financial value of the benefit that they expected to receive. Now let's have a look now at reliance loss. So occasionally, a claimant may choose a different approach. Instead of claiming for lost profit or lost benefits, they claim for reliance loss. And this is essentially money wasted because the claimant relied on the contract being performed. Now, why would someone do this? Well, because sometimes it is difficult to prove what profits would have been made. So a business venture may never have started. A project may have never been completed. Future profits may simply be too uncertain. In those situations, it may be easier to recover wasted expenditure instead. So what's the key distinction here? Well, expectation loss asks, what should I have gained? Reliance loss asks, what have I wasted? And for SQE purposes, that's often enough to identify which measure is being used. Now, we do need to consider types of loss here for a second. So not every loss looks the same. Some losses are easy to calculate, so lost profits, repair costs, replacement costs, loss of business opportunities. They are all financial losses, and lawyers refer to these as pecuniary losses. When we look at other losses, though, they are less straightforward. For example, disappointment, distress, loss of enjoyment. These are referred to as non-pecuniary losses, and contract law is generally reluctant to award them. But there is an important exception. Sometimes the whole point of the contract is enjoyment, relaxation, or peace of mind. Think about holidays, weddings, special events. In those situations, damages for disappointment may be available. Why? Well, because enjoyment was part of what the claimant contracted for. Now we reach one of the most tested topics when it comes to this area of contract law. This is remoteness. So suppose a breach causes loss. Can the claimant recover every loss that follows? And the answer is no. Some losses are simply too remote. So the key question to ask is, would this type of loss have been within the reasonable contemplation of the parties when they made the contract? If yes, the loss may be recoverable. If no, the loss is too remote. We do need to look at this in a tiny bit more detail. So we're going to look firstly at natural consequences. So some losses naturally flow from the breach, and these are normally recoverable. So for example, if defective machinery stops production, some loss of profit is entirely foreseeable, and the parties would naturally contemplate that possibility. We then also have to look at special circumstances. So other losses can sometimes depend upon unusual facts. These losses are only recoverable if the defendant knew about those circumstances when the contract was made. So if a buyer has a particularly valuable customer waiting for delivery, that fact needs to be communicated. Otherwise, the resulting losses may well be too remote. Even when a loss is recoverable, the claimant cannot simply sit back and let the loss grow larger. The law expects reasonable steps to be taken to reduce the damage, and this is known as mitigation. So if goods are not delivered, buy replacements. If employment is terminated, look for alternative work. If a contractor abandons a project, try to find someone else to complete it. The claimant is expected to act reasonably. Now, does mitigation have to succeed? No. This is important. The claimant only has to take reasonable steps. If those steps fail, damages may still be recoverable. The law does not require success, it requires reasonableness in the actions of the claimant. Now, once we've identified a recoverable loss, we have to put a value on it. In many cases, that is straightforward. With defective goods, we often look at the difference in value. With defective work, we often look at the cost of putting the defect right, sometimes called the cost of cure. But not always. Sometimes the cost of cure is completely disproportionate. Imagine spending tens of thousands of pounds fixing a defect that has little practical impact. In those situations, the court may award a smaller sum, reflecting the claimant's actual loss instead, and this prevents damages from becoming unreasonable. Now, we do need to quickly just look at commercial contracts and what's known as liquidated damages and penalty clauses. So commercial contracts often try to solve damages problems in advance. The parties agree a specific sum payable if a breach occurs, and these clauses provide certainty. Everyone knows where they stand. So when are they enforceable? Well, if the clause represents a genuine attempt to deal with the consequences of breach, it will usually be enforceable. These are often called liquidated damages clause. But if the clause is excessive, extravagant, or designed primarily to punish the contract breaker, it then becomes a penalty clause, and penalty clauses are unenforceable. The courts will instead just calculate damages in the normal way. So the key issue here is not whether the figure is perfect. The key question is it out of all proportion to the innocent party's legitimate interest in performance? If it is, there may be a penalty problem. So what's Bowdie's bottom line here? Well, every damages problem starts with one question. How much money should the claimant receive? Then work through the framework. First, what position would the claimant have been in if the contract had been properly performed? Second, what loss has actually been suffered? Third, is the loss recoverable? Check expectation loss, reliance loss, remoteness, and mitigation. Finally, quantify the loss and consider whether any liquidated damages clause applies. And remember the fundamental principle: contract damages are designed to compensate, not punish. The aim is simply to place the innocent party, so far as money can do it, in the position they would have occupied if the contract had been properly performed. Thank you for watching this episode of Bowdie Shorts. Look out for more videos available in the playlist, which should be available for you now.